Hello and welcome to the Story Behind the Stories for the November 25th edition of the Neepawa Banner Press. Feels weird to be hosting again. I'm your host this week, Casper Wehrhahn, and I'm on the show this week actually with Ken. Ken, thank you so much for joining me today.
Good to be here, yeah.
It's been quite a while since we've had you on the show. I think it's been me and Owen for the most part lately. Well, after me coming back from holidays, of course. But getting right into this week's paper, we have a lot of good stories to cover. We had to really squeeze things in here. Not to say that paper is really tight, but we did fill up the pages very easily. We had no trouble doing that this week, that's for sure. Starting right on the front page, we have some good news for the Yellowhead Center, actually. This story came to my desk here, and yeah, it sounds like a pretty good thing for the Yellowhead Center. It came down at the last town council meeting that a application was approved for them to go forward with a service delivery improvement program. So they'll soon have a consultant coming down to collaborate with them.
Yeah, that is good news. The Yellowhead Center is now 50 years old. Actually, the hall is about 20 years older than that because it was built in the 1940s and then converted into a hall in 1972. And back in I think 1990s, there was an engineering study done on the Yellowhead by a company called Bogue and Bogue, and about 2012 maybe there was another study done, and so there's plenty of information available from an engineering point of view on the building. But this is probably the first time that the Yellowhead has had a chance, and the town, in collaboration with the three municipalities, to do, I guess, kind of an audit almost of best practices. So it'll be very interesting to see what they come up with, because I'm sure they have experience with other facilities in other locations, and so it'll be interesting to see what they can bring in terms of information about delivery of services. It's essential because the Yellowhead is the largest recreation facility for 60, 70 miles around, maybe longer, further than that. The next largest one, of course, would be Brandon, Dauphin, and well, Brandon's 50 miles, Dauphin's 90 miles, Portage about 60 miles. And then to the west, there's really nothing that large between here and the Saskatchewan border. So it's important to the region for sure.
Right, and of course, you know, being a volunteer-run facility and frequent board changes, just with freshening up the management, just to have new perspectives in there. It can be difficult to hold on to a steady game plan, as Wayne Jacobson said. So this will help them develop that and figure out any areas they can improve, which is definitely a good thing.
Yeah, every time you change board members or change management, there's a certain amount of legacy knowledge that slips away. And I was fortunate to be vice chair and then chair of the Yellowhead a few years back, and it's a fairly complex organization. I remember back in the day when the town used to give $60,000 a year to the Yellowhead. It's now up to $100,000, but this is back a few years. And somebody said they'd seen it in the paper, of course, that the Yellowhead gets $60,000, and they said, "Man, that would just about run the place for the whole year, wouldn't it?" And I said, "Well, no, it barely pays the hydro bill." They had no concept of, the fact at that time was probably $350,000 a year to operate the Yellowhead, and it's higher than that now. So people don't know, and I mean, it's not their fault, but they don't know how big it is and how much is involved in that, because there's 4 or 5 staff, 4 anyway, all the time, and all the user groups and everything. It's complex. It's a complex, let's put it that way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a very large facility, so of course there's lots of things to take care of with it. So yeah, hopefully this review will help them figure out a game plan there, and perhaps some areas where they can make revenue or cut back on spending for certain things. Maybe it's bleeding just a little bit, so they can reel that back in. All right. Whereas the Yellowhead board will soon be saying hello to a consultant. We actually have a few goodbyes that we're saying this week, Ken. Some pretty big ones, actually, right on page A9, because we do have a B section this week, our Farmer's Advocate. We're saying goodbye to a longtime doctor from the community, Dr. George Ahn.
Yeah, it's he's going to stay in the area, I understand, but yeah, he's been practicing for 50 years. He's in his 70s. I think he and I are almost identical age. Originally trained in England many years ago, obviously, but been in Neepawa almost his whole career. He's been the driving force behind the formation of the Beautiful Plains Community Clinic. Certainly, without his drive there, and I've told him that and thanked him for it personally, the clinic probably wouldn't be there. There was lots of other people worked on it, helped fund it, helped bring the concept together. But they, when Dr. Ong came here, in early 70s, he was part of a clinic that was in the building they're in now, and then the management structure, ownership structure changed, and he and a couple of doctors moved to another building in Neepawa. Actually, I believe it's where Remax is now. They renovated and worked out of there for a while. Then Dr. Ong was on his own for a while. He had an office in the mini mall across from Safeway for a few years in there on his own, and then I think he actually bought the building, and then it was sold when they started to reform the clinic back into the original clinic building. Now, the original clinic building was built in the 1960s, and Dr. Jacobson was one of the founders of that. He passed away now, of course, but he was the basic building, less the additions that have been gone on in the last few years. Basic building was built in the 1960s, and that's where Dr. Ong would have practiced when he first came here. So,
right.
He's been a real driving force on this whole process here, always advocating for better medical services for the area. And again, it's a little like the Yellowhead. You know, there isn't another medical clinic like that between here and Portage, between here and Brandon, and between here and Dauphin. And again, you could probably go all the way to the Saskatchewan border before you'd find a medical clinic with that many doctors and that large a scope of work in Western Manitoba.
Right. Yeah, obviously throughout On's career, doing his practice, and then all of his efforts to help out with medical clinic and any other efforts, he's obviously made a lot of connections with people in the community outside of Neepawa, as well as within Neepawa. So at the farewell party that was held for him in terms of his retirement on the 18th, I believe it was, there was a lot of people coming in there to wish him well on the next steps of his life. And I believe there were some frames there that people were able to sign and, you know, give out their best thoughts.
Yeah, he's a tremendous doctor, well thought of, and I know a family that where he looked after their medical needs for 5 generations. And the oldest generation has passed away now, but the grandfather, the daughter, the son and daughter, and the grandchildren have all been attended to by Dr. Ong, so as well as the great grandfather. So, yeah, 5 generations, that's quite something when they can. 5 generations of family can say that their doctor has been Dr. Ong.
Certainly, yeah, and I don't know how common of occurrence that can be, so it's, you know, congratulations to him.
Well, you know, the longevity triggers another thought into the longevity of not that he's that old, but, well, he's old like me, but anyway, is that he was always adamant that they wanted to recruit Canadian doctors, and he wasn't being segregationist or anything. He just felt that he wanted to get doctors who were trained in Canada. They would have a better chance of appreciating life in rural Canada, and he wanted to bring doctors in who had been raised in rural Canada. He's been largely successful in that. Most of the doctors here were raised in rural Canada, and several of them in rural Manitoba, and because it's different. It's not Toronto, you know, it's not Winnipeg. It's rural Manitoba, and it's different. You can you're much better known in a rural community, and some people have difficulty with that. and there's not as much to do, sort of thing. You're not going to go to the opera every night of the week in Neepawa if that's your thing. You know, it's a little harder to get to a Jets game. All those kind of things that have the appeal of the city. We don't have that here. And if you're rankling for, you know, the big city life, then probably you're not going to be happy being in any profession in a rural area. So he recruited to a certain, you know, segment.
Yeah.
And successfully he did it.
Yeah, it's been going pretty well, I think. I know the most recent doctor that we did an interview with was actually seeking out a rural environment because it really appealed to her. And, you know, the facility at Neepawa, she said, I'm lucky to be here, so. Yeah, a lot of people, once they get into a rural setting, they find, and even if they aren't used to it, they find that it's, you know, it's not bad after all, you know. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's peaceful. There's a lot more charm to it than people perhaps initially give it credit for.
Yeah, exactly.
Our next big retirement actually is someone who's not from the area anymore, but originally was. Zane Lambert, currently living in Ponoka, Alberta, a place I'm not familiar with myself.
Oh, cowboy capital of Alberta.
Yep, cowboy capital, so he's right at home there. Zane Lambert, originally from Westbourne, Manitoba, so maybe some people out there recall the name and to know the family. We were able to get some information on his career there. He's a professional bull rider with PBR Canada, and collected that information. He was doing his last competition because he's going to be stepping back after almost 2 decades of professional bull riding. He's been doing it for about 17 years, and it was his 17th consecutive competition. So he's had a pretty good ride there, and he's ready to just settle down because bull riding is a tough sport and spend some more time with the family. He just kind of felt like it was time for him.
Yeah, he's got a couple of young children.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know the name, I know the family a little bit from Westbourne, which is just on the very east end of our coverage area, about 15 miles beyond Gladstone, I guess. And the family was certainly prominent in the area, and it was good to see they got through it without being totally banged up, because, like you said, bull riding is, well, it's not something I'm built for, I'll tell you that, although the bull might object to my weight. But it's a tough sport. Like, they get banged around pretty bad.
Oh,
it's amazing that he didn't get, in 17 years of competing at a very high level, that he didn't get more seriously hurt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because just reading the information that was talked about with PBR Canada, there's been some recent bumps and bruises, of course, with practices and then competition, of course, but some old injuries that were acting up as well. There was one in particular that he mentioned. I don't remember if it was some sort of laceration or something, but it sounded pretty nasty when I was looking it up there. Yeah,
well, those bulls have no regard for life or limb. I mean, they only have one thing on their mind, and that's to get you off their back and make life miserable for you once they do, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a scary scary world out there, I'll tell you.
Yeah, it's a rough thing for sure. I certainly don't have the strength to begin with, I don't think, to hang on quite that well, but I don't think I have the guts either. That's a pretty big, hefty animal, and I don't want to be in a ring with it.
No, I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah,
so congratulations, Zane, and to your family as well for the rest of their future. I know the wife, Stacy, there is looking forward to getting back to work, and of course, kids are going to be moving on to school, so that'll be a good step forward.
Happy story.
Aside from retirements, we actually have some new news. There's a few debuts going on as well. Starting with the musical kind, which is probably the first one you think of, potentially, maybe depending who you ask. But Midnight Renegade, a local music group, is getting their start. They've been together for a little less than a year. It's made up by Jeff Descender and Mitchell I might butcher the last name pronunciation here, so I apologize, but Bukars, I think.
I think that's right.
Yeah. They were nominated for a Manitoba Country Music Association Award recently, and after the group's first single, Mirrors, recently debuted on a indie country music countdown, it was listed in the top 100 and has moved from 98th to about spot 92 throughout the week. So congratulations to them, and it's really exciting to hear things like this that are local going on and having success.
Yeah, and in the background there, and I think that's probably where they were, the background is a couple of local, actually better known locally musicians than the two fellows you mentioned, because they're relatively new to the scene here, but Huey McLaughlin and Robert Andrus, and they were, I would say they would be backup musicians, but certainly I don't know so much about Robert, but Hugh McLaughlin is, or Blair is the official name, is a very talented musician. He plays with other bands. He plays with Ron Nordstrom in Lunch Money and does a good job there. He also plays with a band out of Winnipeg, or out of Brandon, that does some Winnipeg gigs. And he can play anything. He can play rock, he can play jazz, he can play country. He can very talented musician and singer. So they've got some good solid musical talent throughout the group there. So that was kind of nice to see.
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't have as much familiarity with Mitchell myself, but Jeff, I know I've seen him around. He's collaborated with Neepawa Tourism a few different times, and he's also an owner of Frozen Fire Studio, so he has a lot of musical experience there. And seeing this being able to take off is pretty cool.
Yeah, he has. He's also on the Neepawa Chamber of Commerce board with me, so I see him there occasionally at those meetings. So good for them. I hope they do well. It'd be nice to have another local group do well, and if they get onto the high up in the top 100, that'll probably be the highest that any local group has ever climbed. So we wish them well.
I think so. Yeah. So everyone, check out the music, see if you like it, and help support them. Our other debut that we have going on is of quite a different variety, a new store, which I'm sure people are quite curious about. If keen eyes have been looking around the corner here just past the Neepawa Banner Press building, you might have seen some renovations going on to the old Gillies Entertainment Media location there at 266 Davidson Street. Of course, the street has been paved. I was actually quite pleased to see that was done while I was on holidays. I came back and I was like, wow. But focusing back on the new location here, things have been going on. Of course, the old logo from the previous store isn't there anymore. And renovations have been going on inside. The new owners, Daryl and Belinda Critchlow, who are going to be naming the place Hidden Hollow, a kids store and more, have been working to prepare actually for a pretty early opening, Ken.
Well, I think they're actually hoping to be opened this Saturday, the day of the parade and the craft sale at the Yellowhead Center and everything. It's a big shopping day in Neepawa, so hopefully they can get everything all pinned up and dusted off in order to be open for that day. It would be really be good for them and good for the town.
Absolutely, yeah, they're really gearing for it. They said they were hoping to, overall, provide a new and sort of unique store for Neepawa in the area. And from the sounds of it, I think it will be. I think it'll do quite well, actually.
Well, I think so. They won't have any. Well, they'll have some competition because some of the other stores carry toys, of course. But I think it'll be more, maybe dare I say, higher end toys. I don't know that. But the building, I don't know if do you know the history of the building?
I don't think I'm too familiar, no.
Okay, well, it was owned by the late Alan Gillies, but it goes way back before that. It's been there for a long time. Before Alan Gillies had it, it was owned by Youth for Christ, and it was the Youth for Christ Drop-In Center. I would say that started around 1998 or 99, somewhere in that era. Before that, it was owned by the town of Neepawa, because that whole chunk of land from that building all the way east to the back lane that used to be on the east side of the old resource center was all purchased by the town of Neepawa from Steve Dennis, Valley Chevols. So that building actually was kind of a parts storage, maybe parts sales for the dealership. And before it was Valley Chevols, it was Hans Whelan Chevols. And before that, it was A.A. McDougall Chevols. And the resource center that was torn down was the showroom and part of the garage. And the only remnant of the old place, other than that actual building where the toy store is going, is the concrete block back wall behind the nursery school.
Okay.
And that was the back wall of the old garage. And when it was being torn down, when I actually was mayor in my first term, I asked and they considered it and then took it. I said, let's just leave that wall there because it's solid and it gives a good protection from cars going up and down the back alley, that they wouldn't accidentally drive into the nursery school backyard. So the library was built on that site, the nursery school. The resource center was, the old garage was redeveloped and used as a resource center for many, many years. This actual building, before it was ever part of Angus McDougall's, was owned by Alguire Brothers, and they were a confectionery store. They used to ship wholesale, and I think they had delivery trucks on the road, probably back in the 40s, as early as that. I knew one of the Alguires, the second generation, and many other people did here in town, but Howard Alguire. But they would ship candy and dry goods and tobacco and things like that all over the country out of there. So there was a confectionery good. Before that, I don't, maybe it was purpose built for that. I don't know the history prior to 1940, but that's kind of the rundown of the building. Solid old building that's been repurposed many times.
For sure, yeah. So it's great to see it being repurposed again and have new life breathe into it again. Yeah. And yeah, it sounds like it'll have a good variety. I'm actually quite curious to check it out myself. Of course, for the 26th here, they aren't expecting to have everything in store, especially because they do also still have to work forward with Phase 2 and Phase 3 renovations, which will be progressing throughout the coming days here and should be done, I think, sometime in the new year.
You'll be looking for something to do with gaming, right?
Probably.
I kind of figured that.
I'm also partial to stuffed animals, I will admit. I just think they're really cute, you know?
Yeah, they're not as hard to take care of as the real ones.
Yeah. Yeah, so give them a shout, take a drop by there if they're open on that day. I think they're going to be posting on social media, depending what's going on there. Yeah,
I'm going to sneak over there and try and sell them an ad for next week.
Hopefully they can get in there. And we'd certainly appreciate the business as well, for sure. All right, we better get moving along, so I think we're going to end up short on time here. We'll do a quick mention of Gold Leaf on page A19. Not a new business per se. Not super new anyway. They're still kind of new. They opened sometime earlier, but more so they have a new location right now. They've been there for a few days now, I believe. But Gold Leaf has moved in with Boho Soul in Minnedosa. The owners, Krista Powell and Lisa Buchanan, for Gold Leaf have been friends actually with Megan Swift, the owner of Boho Soul Market, for quite a while, and so everyone involved was actually quite excited to collaborate and see how things go moving forward.
I think it's a great synergy there for the owners there of both businesses. I've been hearing good things about both those businesses, but with the cost of heat and light and rent and everything else, if they can double up, I think it makes a lot of sense from the economic point of view, but also they can work together on the Gold Leaf events. They've been doing some events in the area, and I've got good reports on that as well. So good on them. I think it's a wise move. Really good idea.
Yeah, I hope it works out really well for them. It sounds like it'll be actually a pretty good fit for both businesses there, and yeah, they're really enthusiastic to move forward with this. It sounds like all services will remain as they were, with the exception of canine services. Canines won't be able to enter the facility anymore for Gold Leaf Boutique, but they will still have those services available. Just any harnesses or whatever will have to be tried on outdoors. Was a couple of minutes that we have remaining. I'd like to quick mention, as I mentioned earlier, our Farmers Advocate B section. We were able to pull some stuff together there. Some good information actually for the area. A lot of it out of house content, but very applicable, I think, to the region. So definitely some items of value in there. So be sure to take a look at that. Perhaps on the top there actually might be the Squeal on Pigs program. There's been some sightings of wild boar, which should be taken quite seriously.
Oh, those are nasty boys. They're worse than those bulls that Zane was riding. They don't give you a very good ride, but they just as soon kill you too. So.
Oh yeah, they're quite large and fast, and they got those tusks and all that. So and very high birth rate actually too. I was quite amazed to learn that, because I don't know a whole lot about boars, but they have, I think it said 2 litters every year with like 12, 15 pigs being born in each one.
That's
so
quite a number, yeah. Sometimes they have pretty small litters depending on the nutrition, but they can have a pretty big litter. And they're everywhere. And you and I were having a discussion about this the other day. And wild boar, of course the boar is the male technically, but they're all called wild boars. They were brought into Manitoba, introduced into Manitoba as a way of diversifying livestock operations and using up maybe some waste land or less than crop production level land. But they escaped. They're escape artists, and they run like the dickens, and they have no problem at all making a go of it out in the bush, and they have. And of course they eat crops. They rummage through destroy the crops. They will actually come in, and I think they wouldn't mind if they could grab the odd chicken or duck too to munch on. And they are very dangerous. Do not confront these suckers unless you're 50 yards away with a high-powered rifle.
Yeah. So you definitely don't want to get up close and personal. Make sure to keep your distance, and I believe they want you to phone in any sightings, because hunting the wild boar can actually be counterproductive, according to the article. Very well written by Sarah Plosker there, from sister paper Rivers Banner, because they will then go and spread out further to get away from the hunting, obviously. So yeah, be sure to take a look at that information and the other articles that we have in there. We are running out of time, but there's a lot more that we couldn't talk about, so be sure to pick up a full copy of the Banner Press. While you're out and about, we have a lot of drop boxes there, or if it comes to your mailbox, check your mailbox. It'll be in there soon if it isn't already when you're watching this. Thank you again for joining us. We'd like to hear from you, of course. If you can give us a call at 204-476-3401, or reach out to us at news@neepawabanner.com. If you have any stories or photos you want to send in to us, you can contact us through those means. Or if you have any opinions, same email address or phone number. We'd love to get any thumbs up or thumbs down from you, or letters to the editor. As well, we are a free paper, so we do rely on your help to keep the paper going. So we very much appreciate any ads that you can get into us. You can contact us for that at the phone number mentioned before, or at ads@neepawabanner.com. Thank you again from me and from Ken, and we'll see you next week.